from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word, another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. Today is Friday, August 7th, 2020, and we have a powerhouse program for you today. We're going to focus on Portland's protests, talking about the taking down of the federal courthouse and how it's actually affecting law and lawlessness, what people call evil good and good evil. We'll talk about that in our program. Then we're going to talk about Joe Biden and growing Muslim influence, and we're going to take it out of the political realm and bring it back into the biblical realm where it belongs. Then Jacob and the coming wrath of Esau, which actually ties into Joe Biden and the reason we're actually bringing his story in. So this will be the biblical nuggets of why we're talking about the speech that he recently gave, tying himself in with the Muslim organization. So you ready? Let's get right into our program. Let's begin first with just something I just couldn't pass up. I mean, we get so much bad news to report every week, but how many people remember this, right? Pull that little picture up, Jeff. Let's take a look at this. See the Good Humor truck? Anybody remember the Good Humor truck here? I'm asking our audience here that we have today, is that the Good Humor truck was back in the 60s and the 70s. It was the neighborhood ice cream where they would crave that actually began since 1920. Right? It was sold as a fleet across the nation. And then eventually it was distributed in grocery stores. Because the reason I'm bringing this out is that today, think about today, just the past few days, again, more children being killed in the streets. One poor mother says she just let her son go out to play, 9 years old, shot in the head and killed. A 7-year-old was killed just out in the yard playing, again, just in the last 2 days. But remember when it was turn your children loose? I remember when I was little, my mom would say, just make sure you're back before dark. And that was it. You know, you just went anywhere and did anything you wanted to do. Nobody had to worry about being shot or stolen or taken away and sold off or anything like that. That day's coming again when Jesus Christ comes back. And I just saw that. I came across it by accident when I was researching a couple things, and I said, you know what? It brought back warm memories, and I wanted to bring it to you, and hopefully we've touched a little nerve from your past also. So now, let's get to you can't make this stuff up. All right, this is not funny. This is serious. They're beginning now to silence Christians in their own homes. And if you've been following us over the last few years, it normally starts in Europe and then in Canada and eventually goes to California and then the whole rest of the country. But this is a whole new round of silencing Christians. This time it's coming from Scotland. There's a new bill that's being considered that will silence Christians from even thinking things that are wrong. I'm not making it up here. Now it says, this is the headline, now loving on Jesus in your own home can be considered as a hate crime. Is a new vague law, is a crime law under consideration in Scotland that could criminalize something people do unwittingly in their own homes. The report is being brought up by the UK Christian Institute that warns it could restrict Christians' freedom to proclaim that Jesus Christ as the only way of salvation or call people to repent of sin, even in church. Now, let's set this where it belongs. What they're saying is, it is possible under this new law that when we preach the Word of God, where Jesus Christ says He is the only way of salvation, that will be considered as a hate crime because it will offend other people, especially Muslims in other nations. Now you see why I'm going to lead into what Joe Biden recently said and where all of this is going. Because anytime you see the amount of emotion, the amount of anger, the amount of hate that is being brought about, it usually stems back to a biblical principle, what God talks about at the end time is eventually going to take place in the nation and around the world. This is where this is going to. The Christian Institute says, conduct need not be threatening or even intended to stir up hatred for an offense to be committed. Let me read that again because that probably went right over your head the first time I read it. Conduct need not be threatening or even intended to stir up hatred for the offense to be committed. I mean, you don't have to think about hurting anybody. You don't even have to consider that there's a problem. But you could be charged anyway. All right? Instead, the bill captures any abusive behavior deemed likely to stir up hatred. All right, so now we get into opinion. Now, if someone comes along and says, "Oh, I think that's going to offend somebody," now all of a sudden, now they can take and bring charges on you for even considering to bring that out. An offense could even unwittingly be committed in the privacy of your own home. Now, remember the scriptures talk about where God says that son would be turned against parents and parents against sons, or brother against brother. Well, eventually, this is where this is going to. Now, we also seen that back, as we've been talking about, in pre-World War II Germany, as the hatred grew toward the Jews. All right, so you're seeing that moving along now into the Christian realm in the time that we live today. So let's talk about more of that when we get into the Biden episode here. I want to just bring this out because we sometimes get so focused in one direction, especially with everything going on around the United States with the protests, the riots, the murders, the crime, the violence, you name it. How about the weather conditions? And let's take a look at this because God talked about at the end time that the world itself would be groaning from within. The Bible talks about that. Growing escalation in weather conditions around the United States and the world is at a new stage of increase with greater tragedies. Now, nobody's paying attention to this. They are this morning because as we're giving this program, there's Hurricane Isis is moving up the East Coast even as we present this program this morning. This year already, the 2020 billion-dollar weather and climate disaster. Now, this is one of the ways that NOAA is able to tell us or define the conditions of problems as they escalate or de-escalate around the world. We are already at the end of June, 10 major billion-dollar disasters in the United States. You probably didn't even hear that. But that's where we are already in June. And normally there's only 6.4 every year. We're already at 10 this year. But because they've been so focused on the element around the election and around the protest, all of this is going unnoticed. And that's why we defer from the way we were into in the last few months into some of the issues that need to be brought out this morning. Just 7 months into the year now, we are already past the 40-year average of disasters of $1 billion or more. 2020, as of July 8th, there have been 10 weather climate disaster events with losses exceeding $1 billion each. These resulted in the deaths of 80 people already and had significant economic impacts around the country. The years 1980 to 2019 averaged 6.6. I believe I just said 6.4. Let me correct that to the 6.6 events, which is the CPI adjusted every single year. The annual average for the most recent 5 years from 2015 to 2019 is 13.8. So now, that is over doubled. There's something happened in 2015, if you remember. Now, if you've been following the program, we told you 2015 was a pivotal year in the United States because of a major event that took place. I'll show you that a little bit later as we go through the program. Now, let's take a look at these disasters. Now, let's pull that chart up, Jeff, and let's just kind of leave that up there for a minute or two. Is that you see on the bottom black line on that chart, that is the 40-year average of the disasters in the United States of $1 billion or more. But if you look at it now, the 5 lines, the blue, the purple, the orange, the green, and the light blue, they're all from 2015 to 2019 for the last 5 years. And now we're in 2020 and we're moving in, and 2020 is going to surpass those also. So those are showing you the amount of disasters, how they are increasing. God's holy word tells us in the book of Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26, it is the chapters on blessings and cursings. And in those chapters, God says, if you do what I tell you to do, you will be blessed. If you don't and you reject God's holy word, he says you will be cursed. Some of the way the cursings comes is through this disobedience, is through the natural weather pattern changes that God says is going to come about because of man's disobedience to God. Now, what the world is teaching us, that all this is coming about because of man, it's called climate change. No, it has something to do with disobedience to God. So now, we began talking about this for the last few years. Now, I brought this up. This is the recent chart of the current series that I'm doing, Freedom on the Edge of Eternity. This is just one of the charts that I brought out here. Now, what I'm circling here is 2014, 2015, the blood moons, and what happened there, as you see, is Tammuz 17. All right, that took place on the same time as you began to see the acceptance of the gay rights marriage in America. Now, we said that it would be a pivotal change and begin to alter the way the Americans think, the way we react, and also now the weather patterns seem to be following the same path. Now, you can disagree with it, that's your prerogative, but you can't deny the facts that they are there. We also said that that would probably take place according to God's holy word and what he said was going to take place. I put this up there, Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. And if you haven't read these two chapters, please take a few minutes and go back and see these chapters and see how they apply to us today. Also, when you're in here, I want you to pay particular notice to the fact where God says he's going to bring about cursing, and then he's going to give time for people to repent. And if you don't, he says, I'm going to bring 7 times more punishment. If they don't change, he's going to bring 7 times more punishment. So what we're looking at is an ever-increasing punishment around the globe because of man's disobedience, ignoring God and his holy word. Now, these are all things prophesied are going to take place, and you see them through Revelation and through the seals that God tells us is going to take place just before he returns. Now, in addition to all of what's going on right now, we're already in the middle of a busy 2020 hurricane season. They predicted it was going to be busy, and boy, we are already. Here is the cyclones already named in 2020, so I'm scratching them off one by one, all the way through to just last week was Hannah. All right, this was not this Sabbath, but this was last Sabbath, just a little over a week ago, is it all of a sudden just blew up overnight, 90-mile-an-hour hurricane, and went right into Texas and created a mess for the people down in Corpus Christi and down there in Brownsville area. And fortunately, it only got to 90 miles an hour. No sooner was it done than the ISIS began to form, and that's what is going on right now. Now, this has the mark now of being over $1 billion problem, because as I was watching it this morning before I came here, is moving up into the Philadelphia region, into Washington, D.C., and up in Maryland, and all those states, they have tornado watches all over the place, and some of the areas are already beginning to flood. And it's going to be, but thankfully it's moving really fast, and it's only like at 70 miles an hour right now. But you can begin to see how much damage can be caused if it just simply slows down a little bit and begins to flood out certain areas. Both of these hurricanes are setting records. They've never had this high of an alphabet of ISIS this early in the season. So what we're looking at is this hurricane season being busy, and it's been not this busy since, believe it or not, this might draw a notice to everybody here in our studio, 2005. What happened in 2005? Katrina. Everybody here knows Katrina. You can't get away from that. One of the most costly and deadliest hurricanes in modern times. So we're in that particular period now. And outside in the area that's not on this map, they're watching 2 more possibilities already forming up. And we're only in the beginning of August. We have over 70% of the hurricane season to go, and we're already in the eyes, and who knows where this is going to go. So anyway, we need to pray about this, because this could be another one of those years that are ahead. On top of all of that, now we're looking at the fire season starting out early in California and out west. Now it's called the Apple Fire, that's already grown to over 26,000 acres, and there's only 5% contained. That is of Monday of this week. So they got their hands full already. They've had droughts out there while the rest of the country is dealing with over flooding and the rains. Well, they've got droughts again out west. Interesting, now growing areas where the food comes from, they've got droughts. All right, now let's get into the protest. Portland's protest now is to take down the federal courthouse. And normally when you see something like this, usually it's not what you're seeing, it's the goal and the means behind what they're doing that's very important. And as we've been talking about in this program, it's always you need to look into the biblical portion or the spiritual, because God says we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but we're wrestling against the principalities and the powers of the air of this time. So the evil that's going on in this context of what's taking place, of the government being able to just turn loose, just like in Seattle. I don't know if you've recently heard, but Seattle wanting to defund their police, now they're saying they're not going to be able to address all the 911 calls. So if you, I'm not making this up, so if you're walking on the street and you're being accosted or being threatened and they're pulling a gun and they want your money, your wallet, your phone, or whatever, what they're saying is they're telling everybody, just give them whatever they want and let them go their way. Well, that's going to fix the problem, right? But that's what they're telling people now. If you want to be safe, don't contend with the criminal. Give them what they want so that you can just go on your way. Because we're not going to be able to get to you and take care and save you. Now, in another part of the country, I wasn't going to bring this out, so I'm just going to be careful how I say this. They're telling people, because the crime that they're getting rid of the police department or they're reducing forces, they're telling women, and I'm not making this up, if you've been raped, I'm just being delicate as possible here. If you've have been raped, and the perpetrator has fled, don't worry about calling the police because they probably aren't going to get to you. Just go ahead and call a human resource person or a hospital so they can care for you. Well, I don't know about you, but I would think that at any situation, the woman's not going to be able to say, excuse me a second, let me call the police while you're still here. But that's what they're telling people. So what they're saying here is we're going to defund the police. We're not going to have people come out. We're going to send out human resource people. We're going to counsel with you. But if there's a problem and there's a crime, just give in to it so that you can save your life. Now does that make sense? So now, with that being said, let's talk about the Portland protest. They're saying we don't need any federal assistance. In other words, it goes all the way back to the political. So they take it out of the realm of reality into a political realm that has no relevance. Now, just recently, we put out our quarterly magazine, and in it, on the cover, what I talked about here, that is the headline, and we use that as a theme through the quarterly, Truth is Fallen in the Street. And that's basically where it is. And what you're looking at is a continual protest that is beginning to take place. So now, 2 points for bringing you this picture. First of all, this is Portland banning local police from cooperating with federal agents. Now, you see this picture? That was only about a week ago. You see all them people? You can't go to church in many areas because it spreads COVID. If you go to church, you can't sing because it spreads COVID in church. You have places that you can only meet in businesses with 10 people or less. Businesses are shutting down all around the country. You have to distance it. Schools aren't going to be opening up. The nation is falling apart economically, is being wrecked to its core, but this is okay. Not one single word, I went back and I looked, not one single report, not one single warning about COVID. You see all them people? How many you see distancing? If you have time, go back, you'll also see the people without masks in there too. Not a single word. Not a single word. Now let's get back to the story. This was the protest at the Mark O. Hartfield Courthouse on the July 23rd in Portland, Oregon. The resolution, this is from the City Council. The resolution on Wednesday night bans the Portland Police Bureau from providing, requesting, or willingly receiving operational support from federal officers sent to the city under Trump's executive order, according to the public broadcasting. So they were having problems, and the protests were beginning to come to light, and they were saying, no, you can't have any help, and you can't give any help. There were no exceptions. They made sure that we understood that. Even, and this is the point that they brought out, if you see a federal officer's life at risk, you cannot help that person. That's the law. No exceptions. even for life-threatening circumstances. That's the law. Unbelievable, but it is the law that they've passed. So now, since they were on their own to protect the courthouse, the feds erected a barrier fence around the building. You see that building? See the building? All the writing, the burning, and everything that's going on? Just yesterday, I'm digressing here to talk about that, but just a second, I'll come right back to it. Just yesterday, I noticed on Fox News, they were showing two young men who were in front of an abortion clinic, and they were wearing a shirt, Black Lives, Preborn, I believe it is, Lives Matter. Like baby preborn lives matter, right? They were in front of this abortion clinic, writing with chalk that you can wash away, hose away, chalk, like a chalkboard. And the police came and arrested them. They showed up with 6 police cars, 2 men, and they were protesting black babies being aborted. Now, you tell me, what's going on there? Which trumped the reality? The spiritual trumped the physical. The spiritual is that God hates abortion. So up until now, everything that you've seen, the BLM, the protest, takes precedent over everything else, including COVID. But now when the spiritual realm rises higher than that, then the Black Lives Matter comes down, and now it's the abortion trumps the Black Lives Matter. You follow me on that? That's what's going on there. And that just showed up yesterday. I wanted to put it in here today, but I didn't have time. But I wanted to bring it to your attention. You can go online and you could find it. I went there and I went looking for it myself, but I just didn't have time to put it in here. So now, back to the courthouse. And I showed you that because of all this writing and everything that's on it. No problem, perfectly legal. Don't stop them, leave them alone. Portland Bureau of Transportation demanded the federal government on Thursday to remove a reinforced fence at the courthouse. So now, the feds can't get any help, so they put a fence up to try to give them some protection from destroying the building. So now the city comes back and says that they have to take the fence down because they placed it there in a bike lane without a permit. No, I'm not making this stuff up. That's what's going on here. They said the fence is constructed without permission or permits on public property. And it is both an abuse in a public space and a threat to the traveling public. A threat to the traveling public. That's according to the commissioner. They went on to say, it is shameful that an unnamed, unannounced federal agents would illegally erect a wall to hide from the people they're sworn to serve. They said, I have instructed the PBOT to closely monitor the federal occupiers, and an occupier is someone who's come in and taken over something illegally. That is a federal courthouse that is owned and operated by the federal government, and they're inside that courthouse. They're not occupiers. And they went and told them, we're going to go looking for additional violations. So while everything else is going on, they're going to monitor the feds to make sure that they're following the law, and if they're not, they're going to cite them for contempt. I don't know what's going on. Meanwhile, as it continued to escalate out of hand, now it's gone into where it always goes into. The root of the problem is biblical. Now they're going into burning the Bibles and flags. All right? Left-wing activists burned the Bibles in Portland at an anti-police riot. Yeah, that's what was going on. In addition to that, they also been burning crosses, and they had a whole pile of Bibles. You know, what did the Bible do that they need to protect people's lives there? You see where all this is going? Everything you're looking at today, all that's taking place is a continual hatred because Satan knows he has but a short time. And what you're seeing is the conditioning of the mindset of the people, especially here in America, to be able to accept that evil is good and good is evil. Otherwise, how could you possibly render what Portland in their city council has now passed the laws to say that is right and what is wrong and who they'll protect and who they won't? There's a stack of Bibles that are being burned in front of the courthouse, a close-up. And this is where the downtown Portland protesters started burning the American flags in the street. Burning Bibles were also reported, were popular that night. So you're beginning to see that it's moving to way beyond where they said it was. It's going into the real hatred of what's actually taking place around the world. The Bible says that there would be iniquity is going to abound. Iniquity, another word for that in the Bible, is called lawlessness. A lawlessness shall abound. So there's another very important reason for this, is that God says because of these warnings, and you can read this in Isaiah, he says, because you have refused to repent, I will take away your hedge of protection. So God is removing his hedge. You see the example found in the book of Job, Job 1, verse 8 through 10. The Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? And so Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him and around his household and around all that he has on every side? Now, this is an important point that God's people need to understand going into an end-time scenario of the problems, is that God is the one who provides protection. And if you're doing what God says to do and you're obedient, you follow his laws, his statutes, and his judgments, God says he will protect you going through these things. Same way with the United States. God took this nation and he built a hedge around this nation. And Abraham Lincoln told us that is because of the divine way that this nation was set up with water on both sides, that if this something would ever come to bring down the United States, it would have to come from within. And you're seeing that right now, is that God has now began to remove his protection, and the warnings that God's been given to this nation have been going unheeded. In fact, they're escalating worse and worse. In fact, today, if you get up and you go into any of these protests and you begin to talk about repentance and following God's holy word, you'll be lucky to come out of that with your life. And that's what you're looking at right now. And because of what we see in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 and the continual escalation of the rebellion against God, because of the problems, it's going to get worse and worse, and you can see God's protection being removed more and more, and you can continue to see the deterioration of this nation. Isaiah 5 and 6 says this. It says, he says, and now, please, let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. The vineyard here God's talking about is his nation or his people. I will take away its hedge, and it shall be burned and break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down, and I will lay it waste. We're beginning to see that as we move toward closer and closer to the return of Jesus Christ. And it's not going to get any better. It will only get worse. Isaiah 59:14 says this, so justice is driven back, and righteousness stands at a distance, and truth has fallen in the streets, and honesty cannot enter. And that's what we're looking at today. So now, let's pull this into the next level of evil that's beginning to rise, and believe it or not, is being brought back in now from a presidential nominee, Joe Biden. Biden joined a Muslim online summit to defeat Donald Trump. This just happened just last week. Now, before I tell you about the story, let me tell you about the video you're going to see and who put it out. The VOA. Who's the VOA? It's called the Voice of America, all right? So let me tell you a little bit about who the VOA is. The Voice of America is a dynamic international multimedia broadcaster with the service of more than 40 languages. VOA is funded by the government. That's why I wanted to tell you this, is that this message is actually being paid for by you, the taxpayer. That's who's paying for this through the VOA. It had a powerful beginning. The Voice of America began with broadcasting in 1942 to combat Nazi propaganda with accurate and unbiased news and information. Now, I didn't make these words up. You go online, you'll find them. That's a part of their write-up of who they are. Accurate and unbiased news information. Now, I'm going to have a video in just a minute, and you tell me if you think it's unbiased. All right, so we began talking about the concern of the rise in Muslims and in this nation way back, this is from the focus point of January 25th, 2019. I went all the way back into 2018, 6 months earlier, and we had another focus point back then. Look at the three things that we have here. Muslim culture infiltration. Again, listen to the video and you'll see. The U.S. economy. We talked about how the U.S. economy is going to continue to deteriorate just a year or so ago. And we talked about the growing lawlessness in America. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. All you have to do is understand what God's holy word says. And what I'm showing you, you can go back. I gave you the date. It's online. Every one of these programs, they're online all the way back into, I believe, about 4 years ago when we first started doing this. And now we're doing one every single week, and you can go back and find them. And we don't change a single thing in these programs. Everything we're saying here, you are in there right now, is happening right before our very eyes. Now, Biden says schools should ramp up Islamic faith studies. Really? How many times have we been talking about separation of church and state? How many times that the children today can't pray in school like they used to? They can't bring their Bibles to school anymore. You can't talk about God or you can't pray. But now we want to talk about teaching them the Islamic faith studies in school? Really? Said Muslims must mobilize against Trump. Biden praised Islam as one of the great confessional faiths while claiming it's routinely maligned. Well, I don't know how many of them have been maligned with all the beheadings of Christians over the last few years and the bombings and the tortures that we've been witnessing. And in the Quran is a book of hate, not a book of love, how they want to destroy the infidels, the rest of the world, particularly Israel and the United States. This is a person running for president of the United States who's moving this way as they're moving Christianity out. Biden stated what you're doing has never been done before. He's talking to the Muslim, the committee on the program that he was on. You're registering a turnout of more than 1 million Muslim voters this November. He said it matters under this administration, and we're seeing an unconscionable rise in Islamophobia. Well, I would think that people who are in the middle of being blown up or tortured or kids being cut off, or you look over in Europe and the Middle East, and where there are almost no Christians left in some countries, is that Islamophobia or is that reality? You know the answer to that. I don't have to tell you about it. Let me back that up because I got the video coming up. It's about 2 minutes long. I didn't cut it. This is put out by the VOA. I went ahead and played the whole thing. It's just about 2 minutes and 5 seconds. So let's play that video.
I will end the Muslim ban on day one. Day one. Hadith from the Prophet Muhammad instructs, whomever among you sees a wrong, let him change it with his hand. If he is not able, then with his tongue. If he is not able, then with his heart.
Make no mistake, people. 2020 is our year. Let's dive into it with 2020 vision. We can see clearly that America is fighting for its very soul.
We all come from the same root here in terms of our fundamental basic beliefs. And I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, for being engaged, for committing to action this November. It matters. Your voice is your vote. Your vote is your voice. Muslim Americans' voices matter. I'll be a president who seeks out and listens to and incorporates the ideas and concerns of Muslim Americans on everyday issues that matter most to our communities. That will include having Muslim American voices as part of my administration.
But getting out the vote, getting our families out to vote, getting our elderly out to vote, getting our masjids out to vote, getting our neighborhoods out to vote. So let's do our part
and join the largest Muslim voter mobilization in America,
the Million Muslim Votes campaign. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's make our voices heard. Because we got the means, we got the numbers, and we got the power.
From the streets to City Hall, brown power, the writings on the walls. Yeah, what you fighting for? 'Cause we about to take them all from the ivory tower.
do you think? Your taxpayer dollars at work here. That's what the VOA is. It recently was pulled down, but then put back up again. So I don't know where it stands right now. But they realized what they're doing was absolutely not allowed according to their own policy and according to the government, what's going on there. Let's see what God's got to say about all of this. The legal alien, because the Muslim populations by and large are primarily legal. They don't sneak into the country. They've been brought in because of a allowed certain amount of population to actually come in. And in addition to that, the amount of growth and the births with here in the United States itself. 2 years ago, there has to be an estimated of 3.5 million people moving into specific areas until they have a majority of the community to take over businesses and government offices. And that's what you began to see in areas up north, Michigan, I believe Wisconsin, I believe also in Tennessee or Kentucky. And when they do, they move in and control certain particular areas, and they don't become part of the community. They separate themselves and begin to control. And that's how you begin to move into the politics. There are 5 stages, which I don't have time to go into today. I'll bring in next week that we talked about in the past, showing you the 5 stages of Muslim growth and the way they anticipate and how they plan to take over every country in the world. So at that stage, when they reach where they can bring in a voter majority, they begin an electorate in Congress to begin to change laws. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're beginning to change laws. Let me just give you one simple thing that we all seen. It was like no big deal, but it just shows you how they can change the laws. The Democrats sought to change, this was a year ago, the rules that formerly allow hijabs and yarmulkes on the House floor. There was a ban from 1837 so that if you were Jewish, you couldn't wear your little beanie cap, or if you are another nation or another faith, you couldn't wear your garb, so that would all be equal on the floor. Well, that was disrespectful to the Muslim people. So they decided to change the laws to let them wear their headgear. And the proposed amendment created an explicit exemption. To this day, the Jews still can't wear theirs. Only the Islam can wear theirs. That's my point of what we're talking about. Now, when I come back, we're going to talk about the biblical nuggets portion of the problem that we're looking at. And this is the roots that goes all the way back to Jacob and Esau, 2 brothers, the sons of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham, and how all that's been prophesied toward the end time to come to play in our lifetimes. So in the meantime, let's take a little break, a little short video. It's called Designed by the Creator. Take a look, relax for a minute, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. Pretty warm, huh? Just every life is precious. Every life that God gives to us. How about this? Jacob and the coming wrath of Esau. When you read the Bible, if you don't understand prophecy and how times they evolve into different segments of time in different parts of history, it's impossible to understand what possibly Jacob and Esau could have to do with our lives today. But it has everything to do, and it all ties into a vow from Esau that's never been fulfilled. And because we don't know who Esau's family is today, we don't understand who Jacob's family is today. We don't understand what's actually taking place. So let me give you a little bit of a background about what all of this is about. We find back in the book of Genesis chapter 25 with Jacob and Esau. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a bunch of scriptures. I'm not going to read them all. I'm going to talk about what they are, and I've got to highlight the important points of what I want to bring out in these scriptures. We're looking at Isaac, who was the son of Abraham, and when he took his wife Rebekah, he was 40 years old, and he entreated God because he hadn't had a son, so he begged God to help him conceive. When Rebekah conceived, she had twins inside her womb. In the womb, the children struggled together within her. The children's names were going to be Jacob and Esau. These two children are still struggling to this very day. Because to them, to where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the promises given to God. And also to Esau, but later through the return of Jesus Christ. Because of the differences of serving two different gods. All right? So she said, if it be so, why am I such? She's wondering, why am I having so much problems with this pregnancy? So she went and asked God why she was having the problems. And God says, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from your bowels. And so we have here is 2 different peoples and 2 different nations that will never get along from before they were ever born. Taking place. It says, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. So when they were born, Esau came out first, and then Jacob, if you remember the story, was holding on to Esau's heel and wouldn't let him go and went out with Esau behind. So Esau, being the elder, would serve Jacob, being the younger. And as we know, Jacob's name was eventually changed to Israel, and hence we have the nation of Israel today. Now, the birthright, going on, this is in verse 29. So Jacob, being a cunning person, he took and he was able to trick or connive the firstborn, the right of the firstborn, out of Esau's hands. But the problem was Esau thought so little of his birthright that he gave it up for a bowl of soup. Look, he said in verse 31, he says, sell me this day your birthright, he tells Esau. And Esau says, behold, I'm at the point to die. What profit is it me anyway? It's no good to me anyway. Sure, you can have it. Just give me something to eat. Showed how little respect he had for the birthright position. Verse 34, so Jacob and Esau, the bread and the porridge and the lentils, and he did eat and drink and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised, in the way God says, he despised his birthright. So I think about that today with you and I, and the calling that God gives to each one of us to understand his truth and be a part of his plan for salvation. What do you think about your calling? How much do you put into it? How important is it for you to understand that you have a calling to be a part of God's plan for the salvation and return of Jesus Christ? How much do you put into that? What is your effort? Is it too hard if you take on persecution, or someone looks at you and you don't want to say anything or do anything? Or do you stand up and you hold fast to the truth that God gives you? And that's part of the example that we're looking here with Esau going on. So not only did he get the birthright, he also tricks him out of the blessings of the firstborn. That's found in Genesis chapter 27, verse 27. So he came near and he kissed him. Now, Isaac is about to die. So now he's ready to give his blessings to the firstborn or to the rest. And so the firstborn was always given the right of the firstborn, but he's also giving a blessing of the firstborn. So now he's about to die, so he tells Esau, go fix me something to eat, and when you come back, we'll eat, and then I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to give you the blessing of the firstborn. So as we know, Jacob's mother, Rebekah, heard the story, and she connived a way to have Jacob appear to be as Esau and bring back food to Isaac before Esau got back. And as the story goes now, it says in verse 27, so Isaac came near, he kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment, and he blessed him. So Jacob went out, he put on the garment that Esau would normally wear. He would smell like his brother. He put on skins on his arms so he'd be hairy like Esau was, so that when he got to Isaac and Isaac hugged him, he couldn't see, he was almost blind, but he smelled him. And he said, well, you smell like, you act like Esau, but you have the voice of Jacob. But he went ahead with it anyway, and it says, here's the blessing in verse 28. Therefore, God will give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and the plenty of corn and the wine. And so here in this blessing, you will find the nations of Israel and the lost tribes of Israel, all 10 of them, scattered around this world. Now, if you want to know where they are, we've got information that you can go on online. You can find it. We have it there. Now, a lot of people don't understand that the United States and Great Britain is part of the prophecies of Israel, and part of the sons of Joseph, the 12 nations of Israel. But here, if you want to know where they are, you go through the places in the fatness of the earth, and you will find that all of those nations are around, like the Scandinavian countries, Australia, the United States, and Canada. In the richest places of the earth is where God had the Israelites to dwell, and eventually that's where they moved to. And plenty of corn and wine. It says, and let the people serve you. And as you know, from Great Britain to the United States, is that many of the nations around the world, that they have had the prominent position, and that's another reason that people hate the American people and hate the Great Britain, because they talk about their righteousness and who they supposedly are, but it was designed by God from the very beginning through the blessings laid out from Abraham, Isaac, all the way through to Jacob. All right? So that was in the plan of God. Let the people serve you, and the nations will bow down to you, and you'll be Lord over your brethren. Let your mother's sons bow down to you, and cursed be everyone that curses you, and blessed be everyone that blesses you. So that is a prophecy, and it is a blessing that God laid out from the book of Genesis. Now, I know people say that has nothing to do with us, but it has everything to do if you understand that the United States, Great Britain, and many of the countries in Europe, and of course Canada and Australia, are part of those blessings. And that's why the rest of the world seems to want to return and retaliate on those nations. So there you have in verse 28, telling you about the blessings that these nations would eventually find. Now, a prophecy now, this is a prophecy of what came out. So eventually, when Isaac was finished giving the blessings out, Esau returns. Of course, he's going to find out that the blessing had already been given. So Esau said to his father, after he finds out, have you but one blessing, my father, to bless me also? Oh, my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and he wept. He realized that he had nothing. His brother had tricked him out of his birthright. Well, he didn't really trick him out of his birthright. He just gave it up. And he tricked him out of his blessings of the firstborn. So Isaac answered and said to him, behold, your dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven. So he, now this is important, he is going to live in the same places as his brother Jacob lives. But as you say in before, the older is going to serve the younger. So even though the two are together, one has dominance over the other. So as you're looking at today in the United States and the blessings that we have here, and you're seeing the brother, many of the people of the nation of Islam, through a mingling of marriages through the centuries, are from the generations of Esau, and they have their belief in Islam, or they're Muslim. Excuse me. We have all of that. So while they are mingled together, is that you will see that one is serving the other until. Right? This is very important. This is until. It says, and by the sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. What is the flag on the Muslim flag? The sword. And that's part of their heritage that God gave them from the beginning. So now, you shall serve your brother. And you've seen that throughout the Middle East and through the centuries that's been taking place. All right, now this is the point, and this is what I wanted to get to. But it shall come to pass when you shall have the dominion that you shall break his yoke off his neck. So no longer will the older be serving the younger, but the younger will now begin to serve the older. That's what you're beginning to see take place in the United States and around the world. Now, why is that taking place? It's because of the disobedience to God. God says that if you disobey me, he says, the sojourner that is among you. Who's a sojourner? That's the brothers, that's the families of the connection between the two will rise up above you and you shall be brought low. You're beginning to see that right now beginning to take place. And it's interesting that a presidential candidate is now bringing that in front of the public and they have no idea what he's doing. They're fulfilling their own destiny of being brought down to their knees. And they're going to vote for it. They say, this is good. We should do this. Calling wrong right and right wrong. You're in the middle of that right before your very eyes. But because people do not know who they are, because they don't know prophecy, they have no clue what's taking place. But when I saw that commercial, I said, this is really a problem. But now let's go on. All right, continuing, and the iniquity shall abound. The legal alien is the growing Muslim population because they don't sneak in illegally, as you see coming across the borders in southern United States. 2 years ago, it was estimated to be 3.5. By 2040, they expect it to replace the Jews as the second largest religious group after the Christian. By 2050, the U.S. Muslim population is projected to reach 8.1 million in the United States. Here's a chart that shows you the growth of the ages of the United States over the last 10 years from 2007 to 2017. So you can take time, you can go back and you can take a look at this. Look what Jeremiah 10 says. Thus says the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen. Now, let's go back to that video. So think about what we just saw. What is potential President Obama trying to do? To teach us Muslim, to teach us the faith of the Muslim people. They want to teach it to our children. They want us all to be a part of that faith. God says, learn not the way of the heathen. Now, by the way, don't you think about this. This sermon, if the law that we're seeing in Scotland and the warnings that we're being given, if I give that in that country, they'll put me in jail for the message I'm giving you today for preaching the Word of God. That eventually is going to reach the United States. You see them already shutting down many things of what we say, we teach, and we believe. And this is going to be another one of those. Now, this is just a way of just some historical contents I want to leave before we begin to close the program out. Do you realize that when the United States began, the very first ship that patrolled the waters of the United States was called the USS Constitution? What the Muslims want to do is to replace the Constitution with Sharia law, their own laws. The very first war was called the Barbary War of the United States. After we became a nation, it was the first war against a foreign power. The Barbary War was against 5 Muslim countries. How about that? Part of history. People don't understand it. The struggle that began in the womb will not stop until the return of Jesus Christ. And you're going to see in the book of Luke, it tells us, and when you see armies surrounding Jerusalem, then know that the end and desolation is near. That is going to eventually rise to the point that over in the Middle East and amongst the Israel people there, you're going to see the continual rise of the Muslim. And so you see the hatred of those people in what they call the West, the United States. Because we're brothers. Israel, the 12 tribes, the 12 nations. We're all part from the same family. Now, on the website, I don't know that we have it available to mail, so I'm not offering it in mail right now, but I know it's on the website. From September 2018, it's the sermon I did. It's called The Spiritual Sojourner. I go into this in depth, what we're talking about today, including the 5 stages of the Muslim growth and how they plan to take over the rest of the world. And in every country, that's what they've been doing. So you can go online, you can find it. All right, let's begin to wrap it up now for this today in the program. This is from the Home Office. In the mail last week, sermon by Danny Ellis is Familiar Spirits. In part 1 of the series that I'm doing, Freedom on the Edge of Eternity, in the mail. So if you're not on the mailing list, by all means, get on the mailing list and be able to get a monthly free offering of the DVDs that's going out, that goes out every other week, and you can get a part of those. In the mail, you have a newsletter every single month, and a quarterly, like this one, goes out at least 3 to 4 times a year. Thus we call it the quarterly. And the reason we're talking about all the violence in America, and we're offering a sermon from the archives, and we thought it was kind of appropriate. And so what we did is we went back from 2013 in this statue here, since they're tearing down all the statues in our heritage, we thought we'd show you, this one here is talking about the Founding Fathers Monument statue. And it's all built, everything around this statue, all the way around, talks about our heritage from the Bible. And if you've never seen that sermon, you need to get it. Write in for the Archives of America, Pathway to Freedom. Now, this is from the LBL. This is an independent group who is also connected to the CGI and Born to Win and some independent churches. They asked if I could make this announcement that their feast site at the Kentucky Dam Village, they've had to cancel because of COVID. So we're letting everyone know, but they're in the process of reorganizing, and they plan to restream. And I've put on here so when you get this program, you can freeze it. And this is the information. Go to their website, and they're working diligently to how to serve the brethren who go to that church or those churches so that they continue to serve you, even though they can't get together because of their numbers. There were just too many of them. They weren't able to make it work. So anyway, to let everybody know that they're not going to be having their feast site this year. So now, for us in the United States, all of our feast sites are still a go so far. The only one we're having a problem with right now is in Kalamazoo, that the governor has limited to 10 people for all the indoor activities. So right now, we're going to leave it as is. We're going to stay there, and hopefully they're going to change that, move it back to what it was to be able to give us an opportunity to meet in Kalamazoo. If that fails, we'll make the decision around the beginning of September. If that fails, what we will do is we will move that feast site from Kalamazoo, Michigan, south just a few hours to our own building that we own in Syracuse. And then we'll have the feast in Syracuse. So in the meantime, you can begin making plans in Syracuse just in case. And if you want more information, you can go to Chuck Hunt, who's the feast coordinator up there. And I have his phone number and his email here listed so that you can get that information. So this is from Jeff. And this is our new control tower. This is what we've been talking about. This is from one way looking backwards, so you can see it's not quite finished, everything on the backside over there. So that we now have all of our equipment in one spot to be able to work together. And this is showing the control tower working toward where I'm at today, standing here at that table that you're looking at. Just to give you an idea, now we finally got all the equipment together. All of it's lined up on that platform. And it's, God willing, it's going to help us to be able to increase our production and be able to do better programming to bring them to you each and every week. All right, there you have it. That's our program for today. And with my throat, it just about didn't want to work till the end, but we got here. All right, the end, we like to end with a uplifting video. This is a very fast-moving video. It's a little over a minute long, called Forward Looking. Take a look, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. Well, that's it for our program. As you can see, there's a lot of things going on. We can't become so one-dimensional that we're only looking at what the news is right in front of our very eyes, because they want to sensationalize everything. But there are things going on around the world that we need to stay on top of that are very, very important before the return of Jesus Christ. And we're going to do that as we do each and every week to try to bring you news that's relevant to prophecy today. We take the prophecy out of the prophecy into the current events in the world we live today and try to make sense of all of that. From all of us here at God's Unchanging Word, we want to thank you again for all your support, for helping us to get the word out. And remember, as we ask each and every week, share this with everybody you know. They're going to love you for it. Or not. So next week, God be with you.